Have you ever wondered why some people seem so peaceful, no matter what life throws at them? Or why we often find ourselves caught in cycles of anger, frustration, or fear? What if the key to overcoming these challenges lies in ancient wisdom that has stood the test of time? Welcome to Buddhism and Life, where we dive into the profound teachings of Buddhism and explore how these timeless lessons can transform the way we live today. In a world where we're constantly searching for answers to life's toughest questions, the Buddha's teachings offer a roadmap to inner peace, mindfulness, and compassion. But what does it really mean to live a life in harmony with these teachings? How can Buddhist principles help us navigate our relationships, work, and personal struggles? Join us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth. Hit that subscribe button and become part of a community that seeks to live more mindfully, with compassion, and in alignment with the deep wisdom of Buddhism. Let's explore together how we can integrate these powerful teachings into our modern lives and become the peaceful, wise, and balanced individuals we are meant to be. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help us spread this wisdom far and wide, bringing a little more peace to the world around us. Now, let's move on to the main content of the script, which includes 10 parts. I invite you to listen and feel within your own subconscious. Section 1. The nature of disrespect and why it affects us. At the heart of any act of disrespect lies an attack on our sense of self-worth. Disrespect, in its simplest form, challenges how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. It's like a subtle tug on our identity. In Buddhist philosophy, this feeling of suffering, dukkha, arises because of attachment, and it's not limited to physical possessions or even relationships. It extends to our attachment to how we perceive ourselves and how we wish others to see us. When someone insults us, it's as though they've just pried open that attachment, poking at something very fragile inside. This is why it hurts so much. It's not the words themselves, but the implications those words have on our inner narrative. We begin to question, is there some truth in their words? Does this mean I am inadequate? Do I not measure up? Buddha's teachings on dukkha offer an enlightening perspective. He taught that suffering arises because of our attachment to a sense of self that is fleeting, impermanent, and dependent on external circumstances. We become tied to our ego, and when that ego is threatened, we feel pain. But what if, instead of letting our ego control us, we could rise above it? What if we could see our true essence as something not shaped by external validation? The ultimate wisdom lies in detaching ourselves from the need for approval and external validation. Buddhists believe that true peace comes not from avoiding rudeness, but from recognizing that the rudeness itself does not have the power to affect us unless we allow it. This is a deeply transformative idea. When we don't react emotionally, when we choose not to be pulled into that space of anger or frustration, we reclaim our power. When we remain composed, we stand firm in the face of adversity, just like a tree swaying but not breaking in a storm. In Stoic philosophy, we find a similar principle. External events, including the behavior of others, are beyond our control. We cannot always control the words others say, but we can always control our response. The only thing within our control is our own reaction. And in that lies our true strength. In Stoicism, it's taught that we can train ourselves to only value things that lie within our own control, our judgments, our actions, and our thoughts. Everything else? It's not ours to own or be disturbed by. I once found myself caught in an emotional whirlwind after a colleague made a hurtful remark about my work. It was an offhand comment, meant to belittle, and my initial instinct was to defend myself. I started to explain why their criticism was misplaced. I thought, if I explain myself well enough, they'll understand. They'll see that I'm doing something worthwhile. But in those moments, I wasn't defending my work. I was defending my sense of self. I was seeking their validation. That's when it hit me. By trying to explain myself, I was giving them power over my emotions. I was giving them a hold over my inner peace. So I decided to stop. I didn't explain. I simply smiled and moved on. The more I allowed myself to remain calm, the less power their words had. Over time, I began to realize that the more I responded emotionally to disrespect, the more I was feeding into the very energy I wanted to avoid. By embracing this Buddhist teaching of detachment, I started to let go of the need to seek validation and began to cultivate true inner peace. Section 2. How to respond to rudeness, powerful comebacks. Having explored why disrespect affects us, let's now look at the most effective ways to respond. It's not about attacking the other person or getting revenge, but about asserting our boundaries in a way that doesn't feed into the negativity. You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to ignore it. This simple yet powerful comeback is rooted in the Buddhist practice of mindfulness and detachment. When someone criticizes us, it's important to remember that their opinion is just that, a fleeting thought in their mind. It is not a universal truth. Their words are not a reflection of who we are, unless we allow them to be. In Buddhism, mindfulness teaches us to observe our thoughts without becoming attached to them. Our thoughts are transient, like clouds passing through the sky. When someone insults us, their words are like those clouds. They may appear momentarily, but if we don't attach ourselves to them, they will simply pass. If we can observe without reacting, we can maintain our peace. I remember a time when I worked in a collaborative setting, and there was one colleague who constantly belittled my ideas. Every time I suggested something, they would dismiss it without giving it much thought. I used to feel compelled to defend my ideas, to convince them that I had a point. But as I began to practice mindfulness, I realized that their dismissiveness had nothing to do with my worth. One day, I looked at them calmly and said, "You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to ignore it." The moment I said it, I felt an immense sense of relief. I didn't engage in an argument, and I walked away with my peace intact. The power of detachment, as taught in Buddhism, allowed me to not let their opinions define my own. If I had $1 for every smart thing you said, I'd be broke. This stoic response cuts through the rudeness without giving in to sarcasm or cruelty. It highlights the lack of substance in the rude person's words while still maintaining control over the situation. Stoicism teaches us not to stoop to the level of those who engage in disrespect. We don't need to meet rudeness with rudeness. Instead, We recognize that the person's words have no lasting impact on us unless we give them permission to do so. The words themselves are empty. It's only when we attach meaning to them that they hold power. I once had a friend who was always quick to throw sarcastic remarks at my expense. One day, during a casual conversation, he interrupted me with one of his typical jabs. Rather than getting upset, I calmly responded, "If I had $1 for every smart thing you said, I'd be broke." His face dropped. The humor in the response was disarming, and he didn't know how to react. It wasn't an attack on his character, but a gentle reminder that his words lacked substance. The conversation shifted, and the energy in the room changed. This stoic approach allowed me to stand firm without losing my peace or stooping to his level. I don't argue with people who thrive on disrespect. The Buddha teaches that we should avoid those who seek to harm us. This response is a direct reflection of the Buddhist practice of right speech, speaking in ways that foster peace and not conflict. In certain situations, silence or disengagement is the best way to preserve our peace. There's a powerful Buddhist concept known as karuna, compassion. But compassion does not mean tolerating abuse or disrespect. It means understanding that those who act out of malice are suffering themselves. By disengaging with their negativity, we're not feeding their suffering, we're protecting our own well-being. In my own life, I've had people who seemed to thrive on stirring up conflict. They seemed to take pleasure in pushing others to react emotionally. One day, I found myself in a heated discussion with one such person. Instead of engaging with them, I simply said, "I don't argue with people who thrive on disrespect," and walked away. It was a powerful moment, where I chose to protect my energy, rather than allowing them to control the situation. This moment of detachment was not only liberating, but it also sent a message that I would no longer be a source of entertainment for their negativity. Your attitude isn't going to get you very far in life. This line speaks to the long-term consequences of negative behavior. In Buddhism, karma plays a significant role in shaping our destiny. When we act with kindness and respect, we cultivate good karma. But when we engage in rudeness and disrespect, we create negative karma, which will inevitably return to us. The Buddha's teachings on karma remind us that every action, every word, creates ripples in the universe. By acting with kindness and understanding, we create positive energy around us, which will return to us in unexpected ways. However, when we act in anger or disrespect, we plant seeds that will eventually come back to us, often when we least expect it. I once worked with someone who was consistently rude to others. They belittled their colleagues, undermined their ideas, and acted as though they were superior. One day, I said to him, "Your attitude isn't going to get you very far in life." It wasn't a harsh judgment, but a reflection on how his behavior would eventually catch up with him. A few months later, when promotions were announced, he was overlooked for someone who demonstrated kindness and respect to others. His attitude, as I predicted, had cost him opportunities. In the end, it wasn't just his career that suffered, it was his relationships, his peace, and his own sense of fulfillment. Section 3. Real-life applications of Stoic and Buddhist principles. At its core, Stoic and Buddhist teachings are not abstract philosophies meant to be admired from afar, but practical guidelines for living in the modern world. Disrespect does not come only from strangers. It is often woven into the fabric of our relationships with colleagues, friends, and even family. These situations are rich with opportunity for practicing patience, compassion, and detachment. It's in these very moments that the wisdom of both Stoicism and Buddhism can be most powerful. Let's say you're working on a project, pouring in your time and effort, only to have a colleague constantly undermine you, questioning your ideas, dismissing your hard work, or even belittling your contributions. It's easy to get defensive, especially when we feel that our professional integrity is being attacked. But here's where Stoicism teaches us to shift the focus. We are not in control of what others say or do, but we are entirely in control of how we respond. Buddhist wisdom aligns here. Right speech is a key tenet in the Eightfold Path. Right speech is about not responding to negativity with more negativity, but about speaking truthfully and without harm. In the workplace, this can be as simple as calmly asserting your boundaries, without reacting emotionally. Instead of engaging in a back-and-forth debate, take a deep breath and remind yourself that their words do not define your worth. Use the response, "You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to ignore it," with compassion for both them and yourself. In the words of a Zen master, the bird does not ask the flower why it does not bloom the same day it is planted. Just as the flower blooms in its own time, so does our work. It does not need validation from anyone who cannot see its beauty. Family dynamics can sometimes be the most challenging when it comes to disrespect. A family member might mock your career choices, question your life decisions, or even belittle your dreams. The love we feel for them often makes their words sting even more, because we seek their approval. But the teachings of Buddha guide us to realize that family members, like all beings, are caught in their own cycles of suffering. Instead of reacting impulsively and defending yourself, Buddhist compassion teaches us to see their behavior through a lens of empathy. When a loved one disrespects us, it may be more about their own fear or insecurity than about us. The Buddha said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love." When faced with disrespect from family, instead of engaging in a defensive argument, try offering understanding or silence. By doing so, we free ourselves from the emotional burden of their words and, in doing so, give them space to reflect on their actions. One practical approach is to gently set boundaries. Instead of justifying your life choices, acknowledge their concerns and then calmly say, "I hear your opinion, but my decisions are mine to make." This allows the conversation to end without escalation, leaving both parties at peace. Friends, too, can sometimes act in ways that feel disrespectful. Perhaps a friend makes fun of your achievements or subtly undermines your ideas. Not because they wish to harm you, but because of their own insecurities. The natural response is to feel hurt, especially if the friendship is one you cherish. But, as the Buddha would teach, instead of holding on to resentment or anger, we should look at the root cause of their behavior with compassion. The Buddha said, "A person who is free of resentment is one who is truly free." Friends who speak out of insecurity need our understanding more than they need our anger. Perhaps they feel threatened by our success. Or maybe they are acting out because they feel unseen themselves. In such a situation, you can choose to practice patience, reflecting on their pain rather than taking offense. A response like, "I understand that you might feel a certain way, but that doesn't change my belief in my path," not only protects your peace but also gently challenges their behavior without confrontation. I once had a colleague who constantly mocked my creative ideas. At first, I would try to defend my work, arguing that it had potential. I would become frustrated, feeling that I had to convince him that I was capable. But as time passed, I realized this cycle was draining me. Every time I tried to explain myself, I felt smaller and more insecure. This was when I recalled the teachings of both Stoicism and Buddhism. The Stoics emphasize the importance of not giving power to others' opinions. I reminded myself that my work was valid, regardless of his dismissive comments. And from a Buddhist perspective, I reflected on the idea that this person's actions were rooted in his own suffering. By practicing karuna, compassion, I stopped reacting defensively. Instead, I acknowledged his words with calmness and said, "I respect your perspective, but I believe in my work, and that's enough for me." It was the first time in months that I felt completely at ease, despite his attempts to undermine me. Section 4. The Buddhist practice of patience and compassion. When we encounter rudeness, the Buddhist response is not to fight or argue but to practice patience and compassion. These two qualities, karuna, compassion, and kshanti, patience, are vital to our spiritual growth. Rudeness and disrespect often come from a place of suffering, whether it's someone feeling inadequate or struggling with their own inner turmoil. Instead of reacting with anger or judgment, we are invited to see the person not as an enemy but as someone in need of understanding and compassion. The Buddha teaches that patience is not a passive virtue but an active form of strength. Patience is about enduring challenges without allowing them to disturb our inner peace. Patience allows us to create a space where we can choose our response, rather than being driven by knee-jerk reactions. It's about being able to sit with discomfort, knowing that all things are impermanent. There's a well-known story of the Buddha and the young man who insulted him. The young man hurled all sorts of harsh words at the Buddha, and the Buddha remained silent, simply observing. Finally, the young man, growing tired, asked, "Why don't you respond to me? Why don't you retaliate?" To which the Buddha replied, "If someone offers you a gift, and you choose not to accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The young man realized that he alone was responsible for his words. And the Buddha's patience in the face of disrespect reflected his strength. In our own lives, we may encounter those who try to provoke us with their rudeness. But by practicing patience, we can stay grounded and undisturbed. Instead of reacting emotionally, we can choose not to accept their gift of negativity. Compassion, in Buddhism, is not about feeling sorry for someone but about understanding that their suffering is as real as our own. The Buddha teaches us that we all carry our own burdens, and when we encounter someone who is disrespectful, we can choose to see their behavior as an expression of their inner pain. I once had a close friend who was often rude and condescending. I found myself becoming increasingly upset by her words, and it strained our relationship. After a period of reflection and meditation, I began to understand that her rudeness was not an attack on me but a manifestation of her own unresolved pain. She had grown up in an environment where her worth was constantly questioned. And as an adult, she had developed a defense mechanism of putting others down to protect herself. Instead of retaliating with anger, I chose to show her compassion. I began to listen more deeply, offering support when she struggled. Over time, our relationship shifted, her behavior softened, and the dynamic between us became more harmonious. I realized that in showing her compassion, I was also showing myself compassion, giving both of us the space to heal. The key to responding to rudeness with patience and compassion is detachment. This doesn't mean we become indifferent or aloof, but that we are not emotionally entangled in the situation. In practicing compassionate detachment, we can maintain our inner peace while still extending kindness and understanding to those who need it most. In every encounter with rudeness or disrespect, we have the opportunity to practice the teachings of the Buddha, to rise above the pettiness, to remain calm, and to see the suffering of others without absorbing it. By doing so, we not only protect our own peace but also contribute to the healing of the world around us. Through patience and compassion, we create space for transformation, for ourselves and for others. Section 5. Detachment and Inner Peace. At the heart of both Buddhist and Stoic teachings lies a profound truth. Peace does not come from avoiding conflict, but from how we choose to respond to it. It is not about shutting people down with sharp words or defending ourselves at all costs, but about finding the inner calm to remain unmoved by external negativity. This peace arises when we learn to detach ourselves from the need for approval or validation. The more we allow ourselves to depend on others for affirmation, the more we allow their negativity to control us. True freedom comes from the realization that we are the masters of our emotions, not the situations or people around us. The Buddha taught that attachment, whether to positive experiences or negative ones, is the root of suffering. When we attach our happiness to external circumstances, we are bound to suffer. This applies to how we react to disrespect. When someone insults us, and we feel compelled to react emotionally, we are essentially handing over our inner peace to them. The more we engage with the negativity, the more we feed into it. The practice of detachment teaches us to break that cycle. In Stoic philosophy, this concept aligns closely with the idea that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." This resonates deeply with the Buddhist teachings of mindfulness and non-attachment. Both schools of thought emphasize that it's not the external event, the insult, the rude comment, or the criticism, that causes our suffering. It's our reaction to it, and therein lies our power. In Buddhist thought, right action is not necessarily about doing something outwardly. It's often about choosing not to do something. Non-reaction is where true strength lies. It is not a passive resignation, but an active decision to remain grounded and calm in the face of chaos. We practice non-reaction not because we're indifferent, but because we realize that reacting impulsively only strengthens the negativity in our minds and lives. When we stop reacting to others' behavior, we regain control of our emotional state. We no longer allow other people to dictate how we feel. In the stillness of non-reaction, we find our deepest strength. The Stoics understood this well, teaching that we should be indifferent to what others think or do, as it is outside our control. Their behavior doesn't have to affect our peace, unless we allow it. Non-reaction is an act of freedom, a freedom to choose how we engage with the world around us. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha famously teaches, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This is a profound reminder that anger and resentment, while they might feel like natural responses to disrespect, are ultimately chains that bind us. We hold on to anger, not to punish the one who insulted us, but to punish ourselves. Anger poisons our heart and clouds our judgment, while the one who offended us moves on, unaware of the effect their words had. When we choose not to react, we liberate ourselves from that suffering. The Buddha did not teach us to suppress our emotions, but to recognize that we are not our emotions. The challenge is to observe the feeling of anger or hurt without identifying with it. When we detach from these feelings, we don't let them control us. We can acknowledge the insult, recognize it as something external, and choose to release it without allowing it to permeate our peace. The path to true freedom lies in mindfulness. Through mindfulness, we learn to recognize when we are being affected by others' words and choose not to let those words control us. This is what the Buddha meant by awakening, waking up to the truth that we do not have to react. Mindfulness is not a passive experience, it is an active one. It means being fully present with our emotions, observing them without judgment, and then deciding how we want to respond. This is the foundation of inner peace. Mindfulness allows us to recognize when we are on the verge of losing our peace and gives us the space to choose not to engage. In the Buddhist tradition, the practice of meditation allows us to cultivate this kind of awareness. We learn to sit with uncomfortable emotions, just as we would sit with a storm. We do not try to stop the storm, but we observe it with equanimity. We trust that, like all storms, it will pass. Similarly, when someone disrespects us, we can observe the storm of emotions that arise but choose not to be swept away by them. There was a time in my life when I was constantly in a state of conflict with a family member. Every conversation felt like a battle. I was often criticized for my choices, my career, my relationships. Everything I held dear seemed open to their judgment. At first, I reacted with anger and frustration, trying to explain myself, trying to prove that I was in the right. But each time I did that, I felt more drained. One day, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of reacting to their criticisms, I chose to simply listen. I chose to be present with my feelings but not to act on them. I smiled, nodded, and kept my peace. In that moment, I realized that by detaching from the need to defend myself, I was protecting my peace. Their words no longer had the power to disturb me. Over time, this shift in my response began to change our dynamic. The more I remained calm, the less their words affected me. Eventually, the relationship softened, and we were able to communicate without conflict. This moment was a revelation. When I detached from the need to prove myself, I not only found peace within, but I also helped bring peace to the relationship. Section 6. The Buddhist approach to non-attachment and its role in handling disrespect. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is the practice of non-attachment, not allowing external circumstances, including other people's behavior, to shape our inner peace. Non-attachment is not indifference, rather, it is the ability to engage with life fully while understanding that everything is transient. The Buddha taught that attachment, whether to good or bad experiences, is what leads to suffering. In situations of disrespect, this teaching becomes incredibly powerful. When someone insults us or acts rudely, they are, in essence, trying to elicit an emotional reaction from us. The challenge is not to let their words attach to our consciousness, not to allow their negativity to sink in and grow. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment is seen as the root of suffering. When we react to insults, we are giving those words power over us. The more we engage with them, the more we are reinforcing negativity in our minds. This doesn't mean we should suppress our feelings, but rather, we can choose to let go of the need for validation. We don't need others to acknowledge our worth for us to know it. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." When we hold on to anger or resentment, we are the ones who suffer. The person who insulted us moves on, while we remain trapped in the cycle of our own emotions. The key to peace is letting go of this attachment to anger, resentment, and the need to defend ourselves. I once found myself in a heated family disagreement, where everything from my career choices to my personal beliefs was being questioned. Initially, I felt the impulse to defend myself, to explain why my choices were valid. But as I meditated on the Buddha's teaching of non-attachment, I realized that my attachment to needing their approval was the root of my suffering. By remaining calm, not reacting emotionally, and letting go of the need to justify myself, I diffused the situation. I found that the more I detached from their judgments, the more peaceful and harmonious the interaction became. This was not because I didn't care about their opinions, but because I understood that my worth was not determined by them. Section 7. The power of silence, using silence as a response to rudeness. Silence, often misunderstood as a passive form of submission, can actually be one of the most powerful responses to rudeness. It's a choice, not to engage with negativity, but to rise above it with strength and wisdom. The value of silence is deeply embedded in both Stoic and Buddhist philosophies, where it is seen as a tool for self-mastery and inner peace. Choosing silence means that we do not allow someone else's words or actions to provoke us or take us off our center. In both traditions, silence does not signify weakness, rather, it is a reflection of strength. It's an acknowledgement that not all battles are worth fighting, and not all words are worth responding to. Silence holds the power to deflect the energy of disrespect without creating more harm or negativity. When we stay silent in the face of rudeness, we deny the disrespectful person the satisfaction of drawing us into conflict. In a world that thrives on constant reactions, silence becomes a profound act of resistance and inner strength. Buddhism places great importance on right speech as part of the Eightfold Path. Right speech means speaking truthfully, avoiding gossip, harsh words, or any speech that causes harm. It also teaches that sometimes silence is the wisest response. The Buddha himself often used silence, especially when words would only escalate the situation. Silence, in Buddhist practice, is an expression of mindfulness. It is the ability to pause, observe the situation, and choose the most skillful response. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha states, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Silence can often bring more peace than words that are born out of frustration, anger, or defensiveness. Silence does not mean that we agree with what is being said, but that we do not allow ourselves to be dragged into a conflict that will ultimately not benefit anyone. I recall a time during a work meeting when a colleague made a snide remark about a project I had been working on for months. The remark was dismissive and meant to provoke. Everyone in the room was waiting for me to react, perhaps to defend myself or explain my ideas. In that moment, I remembered the power of silence. I took a deep breath, paused for a few seconds, and chose not to respond. As I remained silent, I could feel the energy shift in the room. The colleague who had made the remark seemed to grow increasingly uncomfortable. There was a moment of tension, but it passed without me having to say a word. My silence, in a way, became a powerful mirror reflecting their discomfort. Eventually, the conversation moved on, and I had saved my energy without engaging in unnecessary conflict. Silence had given me the space to maintain my inner peace and let the situation diffuse on its own. Stoicism, too, views silence as a form of self-control and inner fortitude. Epictetus, one of the most renowned Stoic philosophers, emphasized that while we cannot control the behavior of others, we have complete control over our responses. He said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." Silence, in this context, is not about avoiding confrontation, but about choosing not to engage in the drama. By remaining silent, we take the power away from the situation, maintaining our emotional equilibrium while letting the rude person face the consequences of their own behavior. Silence is not about retreating from life or ignoring problems. It is about engaging with life from a place of equanimity. In the heat of a moment, when words are sharp and emotions run high, silence is an act of inner strength. It is the courage to stay grounded, to allow others to express their negativity without being swept up by it, and to protect our own peace. Section 8. Compassion for the rude, viewing disrespect through a Buddhist lens. One of the most transformative aspects of Buddhist philosophy is karuna, compassion. Compassion is not just about showing kindness to those who are kind to us. It's about extending kindness and understanding to everyone, even those who may be rude or disrespectful. The Buddha taught that every person carries some form of suffering, and much of the cruelty we encounter is often a reflection of that pain. When we encounter rudeness or disrespect, instead of seeing the person as an enemy or an adversary, Buddhism encourages us to see them as someone in need of compassion. Buddhism teaches that hatred and anger are born from suffering. When someone is rude or disrespectful, they are likely projecting their own unresolved pain, fear, or insecurity. The challenge lies in recognizing this truth and choosing to respond with empathy rather than anger. by seeing the rude person's behavior as a reflection of their own suffering. We free ourselves from the need to take their words personally. When we engage with someone who is being rude, we can choose to respond with compassion, remembering that their actions are not about us. The Buddha's teachings on compassion remind us that we can understand the struggles of others, even when they don't express them kindly. This kind of response shifts the dynamic, taking the power away from the negativity and replacing it with understanding. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha instructs us to practice loving kindness, even toward those who are difficult or unfriendly. The Sutta says, "May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering." When we extend these wishes to those who disrespect us, we are practicing compassion in its purest form. We are choosing to break the cycle of negativity and replace it with understanding. I recall a moment when I overheard a conversation between two strangers on the street. One person was making harsh remarks about the other's appearance and life choices. My initial instinct was anger. Why would anyone speak so cruelly to another person? But then I stopped and reflected. What must be happening in the life of the person who was speaking this way? What pain were they carrying that made them lash out at someone else? I paused, and instead of reacting with judgment or anger, I sent thoughts of compassion toward both individuals. In that moment, I realized that responding with kindness, even in my mind, was more powerful than feeding into the negativity. It wasn't my place to intervene in their conversation, but I could choose not to carry any ill will for what I had overheard. This moment reminded me of the Buddha's teachings. Suffering often manifests as cruelty, and the true antidote to cruelty is compassion. We are not responsible for others' actions, but we are responsible for how we respond. When we choose compassion, we free ourselves from the weight of negativity. In Christian philosophy, there is a similar call to respond to hatred with love. Jesus taught, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This concept aligns with the Buddhist teaching of compassion. In both traditions, we are called to rise above the cycle of hatred and retaliation. Love and compassion are the highest forms of strength, and by embracing them, we release ourselves from the shackles of anger and resentment. Compassion is not about condoning bad behavior. It is about recognizing the shared humanity in each person and understanding that their actions are often rooted in their own suffering. In a world filled with negativity, responding with compassion is a revolutionary act of peace. In both Stoic and Buddhist philosophies, there is a deep recognition of the power of compassion and silence. By practicing non-reaction and viewing rudeness through the lens of compassion, we can protect our inner peace and break free from the cycle of negativity that surrounds us. When we see others as suffering beings, rather than enemies, we open the door to true healing, for both ourselves and those around us. Section 9. The role of humor in deflecting rudeness. Humor is a remarkable tool, not just for making others laugh, but also for deflecting negativity and transforming a tense or disrespectful situation into one where we remain unaffected. Using humor, especially in the face of rudeness, is a way of showing that we are not bothered by the disrespect being directed our way. It disarms the person who is being rude, often leaving them confused or even a bit embarrassed because they were expecting a confrontation. not a light-hearted response. However, humor must be used wisely. There is a fine line between humor and sarcasm. Sarcasm, while it may feel satisfying in the moment, often carries with it a sting that perpetuates negativity. True humor, on the other hand, has the power to ease tension, lighten the mood, and put everyone at ease, including the person who was being rude. When humor is employed skillfully, it not only protects our peace but also prevents the situation from escalating further. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a saying, "A fool does not see the value of humor in life." Humor, when used appropriately, is a reflection of wisdom and mindfulness. The Buddha himself was known for his ability to incorporate humor into his teachings, gently using wit to disarm even the most tense of situations. He often used humor to make profound points and lighten the mood of those around him. Humor, in this sense, can be seen as a way of showing that we don't take ourselves too seriously, nor do we take the rudeness of others to heart. In many cases, a light-hearted joke or a clever remark can serve as a shield against the negativity others try to impose on us. It prevents us from reacting impulsively or emotionally, allowing us to keep our dignity and composure while also preventing the situation from spiraling further into conflict. The Buddha taught that life is inherently filled with suffering, dukkha. But humor can be a means of navigating that suffering with grace. It's an act of mindfulness to recognize when to shift the energy of a situation from conflict to lightness. The Buddha's teachings on right speech, speaking in ways that are truthful, harmonious, and beneficial, extend to the use of humor. Humor, when used in the right way, brings joy and harmony, which are essential for the peace of mind that Buddhists strive for. I remember a family gathering, one that was charged with tension due to a relative's consistent criticisms of my career. They had a way of making biting comments under the guise of advice. Instead of allowing myself to get defensive or upset, I paused, took a deep breath, and with a smile, replied, "Well, I guess we all have different career paths. Yours just happens to be expert in unsolicited advice." The room erupted into laughter, and the tension that had been building for hours dissipated in an instant. In that moment, humor didn't just deflect the negativity, it reclaimed the space for me and set the tone for the rest of the gathering. I didn't stoop to their level of criticism, but used humor as a tool to steer the situation into a more peaceful, light-hearted direction. Section 10. How to maintain inner peace in the face of disrespect. At the heart of both Stoic and Buddhist teachings is the recognition that our inner peace is not dependent on external circumstances or the behavior of others. Disrespect from others can only disturb our tranquility if we allow it. Both traditions emphasize the importance of taking responsibility for our own emotional state. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control other people's actions, but we can control our responses. Buddhism teaches that we should remain mindful and detached from the external events that may trigger our emotional reactions. The goal is to practice maintaining inner peace, no matter what is happening around us. Mindfulness is the practice of being fully present in the moment without clinging to it or pushing it away. When we practice mindfulness, we develop the ability to observe our emotions without becoming consumed by them. This skill is crucial when it comes to handling rudeness, Instead of reacting immediately to a rude comment or disrespectful action, mindfulness allows us to take a step back, breathe, and decide how we want to respond. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. This attachment isn't just to material things or people, but to our thoughts, our ego, and even our reactions to external events. When we attach ourselves to the idea of being respected or validated, we are setting ourselves up for suffering. Detachment, in this context, means freeing ourselves from the need for others' approval and letting go of our attachment to outcomes. We don't need to be right or win the argument, we simply need to maintain our peace and integrity. A central practice in Buddhism is meditation, particularly focusing on the breath. By concentrating on the breath, we anchor ourselves in the present moment. When we practice focusing on the breath, we learn to observe our thoughts and emotions as they arise without attaching to them. We can recognize the insult or the rude comment without identifying with it. This is the first step in cultivating detachment and emotional resilience. In Buddhist meditation, we are encouraged to visualize ourselves surrounded by loving kindness, metta. This practice helps us cultivate a sense of inner peace and compassion. Even in difficult situations, when we face disrespect, we can remind ourselves that we are worthy of love and respect, regardless of others' actions. By grounding ourselves in these practices, we maintain the strength to stay calm and centered in the face of negativity. To maintain inner peace in the face of disrespect, we must cultivate emotional equilibrium. This requires ongoing practice. In Stoicism, Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This means that when someone disrespects us, it is our response, not their actions, that defines our emotional experience. We can choose to remain calm, unaffected, and composed, and in doing so, we regain control over our own emotional state. When we encounter rudeness, our automatic response might be to feel hurt, angry, or defensive, but through mindfulness and detachment, we can choose to let those emotions pass through us without letting them dictate our actions. By doing so, we retain control of our emotional responses and protect our inner peace. There was a time in my life when I would be deeply affected by the criticisms of others. A colleague in particular often made negative remarks about my work, undermining my efforts in front of others. I would immediately feel my chest tighten with frustration, and my thoughts would race with the desire to defend myself. But one day, I realized that reacting only gave him more power over me. I decided to practice mindfulness, taking deep breaths whenever he made a comment. Instead of reacting, I focused on my breath and allowed the feelings to rise and pass without attaching any importance to them. Over time, my ability to remain calm in the face of his rudeness grew stronger. I no longer felt disturbed by his words, and eventually, his behavior began to change. He realized that his attempts to provoke me were futile, and the dynamic between us shifted for the better. The essence of both Stoicism and Buddhism lies in the ability to remain unaffected by the negativity of others. Maintaining inner peace through mindfulness, detachment, and compassion. By practicing these teachings, we can transform the way we respond to disrespect, turning each challenge into an opportunity for personal growth and tranquility. Through these practices, We not only protect our own peace but also contribute to creating a more harmonious world around us. As we wrap up today's video, remember this: every moment is an opportunity to practice mindfulness, to embrace compassion, and to let go of the attachments that cause us suffering. The teachings of the Buddha remind us that peace is within us all. It's simply a matter of how we choose to nurture it. If today's video has inspired you, or if you found yourself reflecting on how Buddhist wisdom can shift your perspective, don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who might benefit. We're building a community here at Buddhism and Life, and your support means the world to us. It's not just about views and subscribers, but about creating a space where we can all grow together in peace and understanding. Thank you for being part of this journey. We look forward to sharing more teachings, stories, and insights that will continue to light the way. Until next time, may you find peace in every step and wisdom in every thought. Remember to live with compassion, and let the Buddha's teachings guide your path. Thank you so much.